Today I want to talk to you about the border battle. I'm not referring to the border battles between the Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers that has so often come up in their storied history. You know, Bud Grant, Vince Lombardi, Brett Favre. I'm talking about a border which really to some degree doesn't exist anymore, not like it's reputed to. It's a border that looks more like a wall of the Romans as it fell in spots. They were overrun by the neighbors to the north, and that empire was replaced. This border was established as a part of a series of wars and conflicts that took place between, in North America, between the two great powers, Spain and England, and after they settled the Western Hemisphere. Now, some people want to call this colonialism. But when they mean that, too often they're referring to white people colonizing different parts of the world and turning it white. Well, if you want to call the Spanish white people, I suppose you can do that. Then we're talking about Spain colonizing Mexico and Central America, and much of Latin America together with Portugal, who colonized Brazil. But what we're really talking about are those remnants, really, the foundation of a Spanish empire and the white colonization, and where it ended up, where a border between the Spanish and English colonies ended up. And that is called today the Mexican border, including the Rio Grande. So it's not a race thing. I know Barack Obama, who was an enemy of the colonization of his home country, Kenya, likes to pretend that this is more white people stuff, Christian stuff, but it's not. It is the resolution of the two remaining colonial empires in North America, that of the British and that of the Spanish. And we can talk about the French in Canada, and we can note that although England consolidated the United States, that there were many other European powers who participated along the way, including the Vikings, New Sweden. Of course, the Vikings were the first Europeans to discover America, any of the Americas, by sea. And so, what are we to make of the recent claims, violent actions that are trying to undermine the legitimacy of this border battle, to revive the border battle between the Spanish and the English colonies who have evolved into the United States of America, USA, and the United States of Mexico? So recently, it became injected into the California primary. That was a very successful primary for Donald Trump, whom I'm supporting for president. I'm now running for Congress as a Democrat against Betty McCollum, who is going after her 9th term. You never really hear of Betty because she really doesn't do anything in Washington but hold down a seat and go for the National Democratic Party. But I'm supporting for President Donald Trump. And I support his border plan because it fits within my plan for the border, which is based on this treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And of course, the minority Mexican-American judge who somehow got hold of Donald Trump's Trump University case. I wish I had enough to attend Trump University and the opportunity to apprentice with real estate people and make some money, but I haven't. Still, it looks like a good opportunity. The man's obviously brilliant. But this Gonzalo Curiel, it's documented. He's a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association. And when Trump appeared in 2015 talking about building a wall, here comes Curiel's organization and swears that they will boycott all of Trump's business ventures, including Univision, NBC, and Macy's. Remember them? And further, Gonzalo Curiel's Bar Association confirmed that they would take similar actions against Trump's business interests and that they would make a difference. Well, Crooked Gonzalo tried during the California primaries, but Trump set a new record for Republican votes, eclipsing that other guy who speaks Spanish, George W. Now, there's a ton of misinformation out there. I read this tweet. Go read your history. Please learn some history before you talk. Texas was from Mexico, so please do some research. And they posted a map of the first Mexican Empire from 1821. There's disputes over how it started, this border battle. I talked to a person of Mexican origin the other day, and he said that American history is just all wrong. The things we have in our history books are wrong. Mexico never declared war on the Mexican state of Coahuila y Texas, which is really a settlement where Stephen Austin, his family, were allowed by the Mexican government there to purchase land. And basically, you're having an integrated community. And our history says that the Mexican government did not support this. They objected to it and declared war. I don't know if they tried to overthrow, replace that government of Coahuila y Texas and rescind the land deeds and return it to the control of the Mexican federal government. But he said, this is just another American creation, a mythical thing that never really happened. But that's what our history says. And regardless of history, there followed a series of attacks in the area, which is now the Mexican border area. But at that time, it had never really been worked out between those European powers who established their colonies in the United States and in Mexico. So there's this dispute about, how the border battle began. But what there's no dispute about is that the United States had developed a very effective military. We had been at that point, but we had not been in a war with Spain ourselves personally, but Spain had been defeated by the British earlier in history and kind of ceased to be much of a combatant for the United States. But the United States had fought with England because we started off as English colonies. And I guess many English today still don't approve of that independence. And they had quite an empire going there. And here that empire was composed of colonies which they established. And they gave those people their rights, including the right to government. Unfortunately, when they needed money, the king tended to come to us pretty hard, and this resulted in conflict and unwillingness by the American colonies to continue as part of the British Empire. However, Spain continued to fight south of the border with the French. The French and the Spanish were constantly opposed to each other in areas down around Florida and the Caribbean, Mexico, and they conquered those areas, the conquistadores. They conquered them and made them into part of their empire. You could hardly say they were colonies because they had no existence as a colony. They were just part of an empire. And here's the difference. The U.S. supported the independence of Mexico when it occurred. And in fact, we supported the independence, the self-governance of many nations in the hemisphere. We were their friend. I'm not saying that's always been the case, but originally, the idea of the United States is to support independence and self-governing peoples based on the principles of equality and human rights. And that's what we support now for all of Mexico. But we also have this treaty as a result of this border battle. And we want to abide by that treaty. But millions of people who illegally pour across the border are in violation of that treaty. That's a violation of the treaty by Mexico. Now you can say Mexico doesn't want that. But when Trump says, let's impound, let's say, tens of billions of dollars that pour back across the border illegally to families in Mexico, people in Mexico, they're a serious source of revenue for the government. And so you have to say that they do want that. Now, the latest figure I've seen is $24 billion. I have to tell you that I have not had the time or access to information to nail that figure down. But that's the source that I've seen, $24 billion a year. So in other words, they do want these people to come across the border illegally and send the money back. Now, we have lots of ties with Mexico, and what we want to do is to legalize and to normalize those ties. Now, if elected in the House of Representatives, there's immigration legislation that has been around there for about a decade. It's long been an issue that we're trying to address. And we tried to solve it with amnesty like 30 years ago. Now Hillary Clinton is running on wanting to give amnesty to all of the illegal immigrants. And Barack Obama is going ahead and doing it by his so-called executive orders. They're not valid, so they're not executive orders. But they're his so-called edicts and pronouncements. No legality or constitutionality, But he's carrying out, on a racial basis, immigration, basically the dismantling of our border and our immigration system. And he's hurrying in return to get these people to vote for Hillary Clinton in the upcoming election. And in turn, he will continue that. He just endorsed her today. Now, what will happen if we go down this road? Well, the border will just move north, okay? If we don't firm up that border, it's going to disappear. And it's going to be whatever the people are, wherever the people are. There'll be no way to enforce American law because the people there won't be Americans. It'll be an area much like Waziristan in Pakistan, where it's outlaws, where there is no respect for the law because they're a citizen of no nation whose laws they recognize. And we see evidence of that, as Donald Trump has pointed out, in border states. And we saw evidence in San Jose, and I believe San Diego, Sacramento, a number of California cities in which Governor Jerry Brown did nothing to restrain the violence against people who are simply trying to exercise their right to vote. Now, my opponent, Betty McCollum, backs this lawlessness by Obama and Hillary followers because she has long identified herself with Luis Gutierrez. Now, he's not a Mexican-American. He's a Puerto Rican who has, for a long time, occupied a safe seat from Illinois in the House of Representatives. So if you vote for me, you'll be voting for somebody who will change the vote from a blind follower of Luis Gutierrez to a representative for you, who represents the continuation of the United States of America. We stand for opportunity, compassion, and human rights under the rule of law, which we have evolved through the establishment of our United States Constitution and our Bill of Rights. That rule of law cannot operate if our leaders are following around rabid immigration activists who support lawlessness, as we've seen in California, and support the erosion of our country, our borders, and our way of life. Now, this is no good for people along that border. Now, I understand that border states along the Mexican border are not strong enough to really help in the development of human rights, security, economic opportunity, education, and community, all along both sides of the Mexican border. In order for this to occur, we are told, the federal government in Mexico City has to make this a high priority. The chances of this are remote, because as Trump has said correctly, Mexico in this regard is a failed state. It simply can't control their border. They don't have any leadership that will work with us in the United States to achieve this objective. Even though both countries, as good neighbors, under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, would benefit enormously from this kind of leadership. That's the kind of leadership in this border battle, a bigger border than the Minnesota Vikings versus the Green Bay Packers. And I heard that Aaron Rodgers is going to give up cheese, I believe. So that's a development along that particular front. But this particular front, I want to provide real leadership in Washington, not be a popular follower, a trendy follower who does not know what they're doing when the future of this country is at stake, as it is now. And so again, I want to work with our states on the border, such as Arizona, New Mexico, California, and with the border states of Mexico. There's 10 of those. They meet, called the Border Governors Association. I want to empower those people so that the two countries can direct our resources and our attention to develop that border, a successful international border region in which there will be jobs, factory jobs, manufacturing, services, information jobs on both sides of that border in Spanish and English that will mark friendship and cooperation of our two countries. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? Do we really look forward to a TSA Homeland Security economy where the best an American college grad can aspire to is checking the identity of those across the border? When what we could be doing is working together with our industry, our technology, and our knowledge to create a real future, the real new history, which is built on the progress of the past. And so you can see more about my specific discussion of this. I have a whole playlist on immigration on YouTube, which I began in 2010. It's got maps, it's got debates, including debates with Betty McCollum, where she says she's just down with whatever Luis Gutierrez, Illinois, or whatever Paul Ryan, want to do. That's the side she's on. So I'd like you to look at my ideas. I'd like to debate this issue with Betty McCollum. I will formally request this of her campaign, to have at least 2 debates, including one focusing solely on immigration, before the August 9th primary election. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm running for the House of Representatives for Congressional District 4, Minnesota, just across the border from Wisconsin, and the home of the birthplace of the state of Minnesota, which has been represented by Eugene McCarthy, Bruce Ventel, other notables in the past, but for the last 8 cycles has been a safe seat for Betty McCollum. And I think it's time that we challenge the lack of movement, lack of ideas, lack of leadership on this and so many issues during those last 8 election cycles. And I approve this message.